So Jesus says, if someone strikes you on the cheek, turn to them the other as well. Now, at this period in this social context, at this period of time, if someone was of higher social status than you, the law gave them the benefit of the doubt. The assumption was that people of high status wouldn't need to subvert the law because they already have riches, they already have high status, so they received the benefit of the doubt. Do with that what you will, but that was the assumption that's recorded in various legal codes. So if a person of high status obeys certain requirements, they're allowed to hit people of lower social status without any recourse to themselves. So if someone of high status hits someone of lower status with the back of the hand, that was a socially acceptable act, which would require no justification from the person who did the hitting, right? So it would only apply to the right hand and to using the back of the hand. And the reason for this has to deal with the fact that, in the first century, there is no running water. They didn't have Purell. So any basically dirty acts, any like going to the bathroom, any cleaning of dirty things would be done with the left hand. The left hand was seen as the unclean hand. You wouldn't pat someone on the back with your left hand. You wouldn't touch them with your left hand. When you were reclining at a dinner party, people would recline on their left side so as to pin down their left hand, and they would only then be able to reach into the food bowls with their clean hand, with their right hand. And so this action would only have been allowed using the right hand and the back of the hand, because striking someone with the palm of the hand was how you struck an equal. And if you were going to strike an equal, you had to justify that action. So again, you can strike someone with the back of your hand if they're of lower status. That is acceptable. That doesn't require a justification. If you strike someone with the palm of your hand, that is acknowledging that they are an equal, and that requires justification. So Jesus says, if someone strikes you on the cheek, turn to them the other as well. Now, in a classroom setting, we'll demonstrate this. But if you do this, if you are backhanded by someone with their right hand and then you turn the other cheek, they can't hit you with the back of the hand again, right? Like I had a student once who just pretended like they went like that, and I guess that works. But the idea is that you are forcing them to either hit you with the palm of their hand or they have to retreat, right? So when Jesus says turn the other cheek, it's not receive other people's violence. It's not look past the concerns of this world, because in the next world you'll be rewarded. There are elements of that within Jesus's teaching, sort of, but that is not the point of this saying, of this command, right? When Jesus is doing this, what is he doing? He's giving people of low status an action so that they can stand up to the people who are abusing them and they can assert their own equality, right? Because either the person is going to hit them with their palm, at which point they're going to go to that person and say, you've just acknowledged that person as an equal. Do you have a reason for striking them? And if they don't, then the person who's been doing the hitting is going to be in trouble. Or that person is going to have to retreat backwards in shame, leaving the person of lower status there in victory. A common or a typical interpretation is that when Jesus goes into the temple and he overturns the tables and he kicks out the money changers and he kicks out the people selling animals, that what Jesus is doing is shutting down, or in some sense ending, the sacrificial system. And then the reason why Jesus would want to shut down or end the Jewish sacrificial system is because he in some form is going to replace it or end it. Right? And so this fits some of the traditional Christian ways of understanding the Jewish law as a temporary thing, as something that Jesus or Christians are coming to supersede or to replace. And so this is a moment that it's really helpful to slow down, to take a closer look at the text and to ask, is that a possible interpretation of what Jesus is doing? Is that a plausible interpretation of what Jesus is doing? So a couple of things to understand. So one is that the presence of money changers and the presence of people selling animals is actually something that is sort of required by the law. It's not outlined exactly, but the law does talk about how if people are traveling from a long distance to come make a sacrifice, and there is a danger that the animal that needs to be alive and in good condition when they get to the temple might not be like that, that what they can do is that they can sell the animal, they can take the money, they can bring it to the temple, and then they can exchange that money for a suitable animal that can be used in the sacrifice. In other words, the money isn't going to get damaged in the journey towards Jerusalem. So you can trade a good animal for money, and then you can trade that money for a good animal and carry out the sacrifice. So there is a part of this that is required by the law. And I don't think the issue is actually the fact that people are exchanging money. And again, the exchanging money would be needed because certain money only was used in certain regions, but when they come into Jerusalem, they have to use other types of money. So it's like when you go to another country and you have to get the currency of that place. So I don't actually think, and we're going to look specifically at why, but I don't think there's a reason to think that the problem is that this action is being carried out in the temple, right? The problem is not the animals being provided. The problem is not the money being exchanged. The problem is not the Jewish sacrificial system. And the reason why I say that is because the text actually interprets these actions for us, because after these actions, it talks about the Jesus's actions corresponding to the actions and the saying of Jeremiah, when Jeremiah says, my house should be a house of prayer, but you have turned it into a den of thieves, right? That's the interpretation that Luke gives these. Again, thinking about the Jewish prophets, what were the Jewish prophets concerned with? The Jewish prophets were concerned, or their goal was to have a society that reflected the ideals of that which was worshipped inside the temple. In other words, the world outside the temple, or the society that surrounded the temple, should match the ideals reflected in the prayers and the offerings that were happening inside the temple. The outside should be like the inside, which also sounds like some stuff that Jesus says along the way, right? And so we've seen Jesus reflect this concern for care for the poor, protection of those on the margins, those with power being able to use their power and their resources and their privilege in order to do that. We've talked quite a few times about how that plays a prominent role in actions and stories that Jesus tells. And when we come back to Jeremiah, we see the same idea in Jeremiah 7, what's known as Jeremiah's temple sermon. So I'm going to why that's an important issue to decide on in this context, is that Jeremiah is giving this message, speaking this to the people at a time when Babylon is threatening to overtake the region, right? So there is an impending political crisis. The people are going to need protection. They're going to need to be able to rely on God. And God is basically saying, if you want that to happen, if you want me to be here, if you want me to dwell with you in this place, in this land, then this is what you need to do. You need to truly amend your ways and your doings. You need to truly act justly one with another. That means not oppressing the alien, the orphan, and the widow, or shedding innocent blood, etc., etc. It sounds a lot like the types of commands that we looked at in Isaiah. And this is in comparison to a different approach, which is being offered by other prophets during the time of Jeremiah, who simply say, we're safe because we have the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. And the repetition there shows that what they're singling in on is simply the possession of this temple, right? We have the God's temple, therefore we can control this God, therefore this God will do what we want and not let us be conquered. And what Jeremiah is saying, that's ridiculous. That's not how your God works. Your God doesn't care about this temple. Your God cares about you doing these things that reflect God's characteristics.